It still amazes me, by the way. Every school teacher probably envies me that all I have to do is walk up here and everybody's quiet. And every school teacher's like, man, what magic trick is he pulling off to have that happen? Anyway, great to see everybody this morning. Thanks for joining us for our Bible study today. We're going to be in the book of Ecclesiastes. We opened that study on Wednesday night. We introduced it. We had a pretty good conversation about who we think the writer is. We're pretty confident that this is most likely Solomon that writes the book of Ecclesiastes. He doesn't identify himself in the book, but there's lots of markers, right, that kind of point right to him as it relates to how he references, the writer references himself as a king in the time of Israel and those kinds of things as it relates to that. So we're dealing most likely with Solomon here, writing the book of Ecclesiastes. Lots of wisdom, right? It's interesting. He's going to have this lengthy conversation throughout the book of how there's been lots of wisdom, but it actually was more troublesome than he ever imagined because he pursued earthly wisdom, as we evidenced on our study Wednesday night. And so let's jump back here in just a moment, back into our study of the book. But before we do that, if you would, let's bow our heads together and we'll share in a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, thank you for the day you've blessed us with. Thank you for this opportunity to again open the pages of your word, to appreciate the guidance and the understanding that's provided for us in the book of Ecclesiastes. May we appreciate this theme of vanity of vanities when we pursue things of this world and we get engaged in and preoccupied on the things of this earth, the challenges that presents to us. Keep us eyes focused upon you and your spiritual work that you have for us, and help us gain an appreciation for that understanding through this study even this morning. Thank you again for Jesus. Thank you for all the blessings provided through him, and it's through his name that we pray. Amen. All right, so let's think about this book a little bit again. And in the first part, first 7 verses or so, he made comparisons, right? He tried to get us to understand, number one, we kind of side pointed the fact on Wednesday that he kind of had an understanding of the earth that men kind of thought they didn't figure out till centuries later. But Solomon's already talking about it, right? How he understood the winds and how he understood how the sun worked and how the rivers could flow into the sea, but the seas don't just keep spilling out, right? And so he was grasping things of this world that men much later after him kind of said, well, we figured it out, when he had already had. But at the end of it all, he's like, man's grasping for all this wisdom and understanding of things, and the world hasn't changed, right? The things just keep occurring. Generations come, generations go. The rivers flow into the sea. The sun rises. Men think we can get smarter than we actually are sometimes, and so he used that at the outset of this chapter. So I want to pick up in verse 8. That's kind of where we left off on Wednesday night. But he said, "All things are full of labor. Man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing." When we become overly occupied with pursuits of this world, what generally happens? According to what he's saying there in verse 8. All right. Right. So they're never satisfied, he said, right? They're never content, and maybe another word. When that's your pursuit, there's always something better. There's the next thing, right? And anybody that's ever purchased much of anything, right? The moment you bought it, it's out of date, right? As soon as you buy it, almost, go buy a car and drive it off the lot, and if you're anything like me, you get it home and you're ready to go trade it, right? You're dissatisfied pretty quickly. My mother-in-law's here and laughed at that, by the way. But anyway, so right, we become very dissatisfied very quickly when we get preoccupied with those kinds of things. And so he's saying men work and work and work. They're full of labor, but the eye just never wants to see more, and it wants to the ears want to hear more. They're always dissatisfied when that's our focus. And keep in mind, that's really the pursuit of the writer throughout the book, is to try to get us to see that when the earth and the things of this world are the focus, then who gets left out of that equation? God does, right? All of our time, energy, and efforts are put into this world, and the next thing you know, we've got no time for God, and we don't give Him any thought as it relates to what He wants. And so that's what He's warning us about. We can spend all day and we see something, and oh no, our eyes want to see something else, and it wants to see something else, or we want to hear something else. And all the while, God's the one being neglected and forgotten about in the process. He makes this interesting statement in verse 9. The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be. And that which is done is that which shall be done. And there is no new thing under the sun. It's interesting. Man tends to want to seek out, right? We want the newest thing, the latest thing. And what's interesting, you can watch it in trends, is that the latest thing was probably the latest thing 50 years ago, right? There's this odd cyclical kind of relationship when it comes to the newest things that are out there. And the truth is, especially when in the pursuit of earthly wisdom, there's nothing new, he said. And man wastes a lot of time trying to grapple at things that he would define as that's the newest idea or the newest philosophy or the newest piece of wisdom that comes. But is there really anything new? Go ahead, Brian.
Well, I just had a question because now that I'm reading it on the big screen, it's a little bit to see a big screen.
It's amazing, right?
Is he just talking about the things that we do? Because the thing that hath been, or is he talking about both things we do that are not new and things around us are not new? Do you think he's talking about both, or just the things that people do?
Yeah.
The thing that has been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done. I just wondered. That just popped in my mind.
No, I always just assumed that the writer was just talking about the idea that you're not going to find something brand new. It's probably already been thought of before and seen before.
Pursuit.
It's the pursuit that he's challenging. Yeah, I think that's what I grasp from it.
This kind of makes me feel like it's a continuation of the thought that we talked about from verse 4 of chapter 1. One generation passeth away, and another generation comes, but the earth abideth forever. This generation will come, you think you're better than this generation before. It's really the same thing. You're making the same mistakes. Here, you've got this. What has happened, it's going to come. It's the same thing over and over. There's no difference.
Yeah. And right. And I think that anytime man begins to convince himself that there's always something better out there, right? And that's all you spend your time doing. He's seeking that which is better, and he's not. So it leads to discontentment. We're never satisfied. We tend to waste a lot of time because we're always seeking out something that really doesn't exist in a sense, right? We're trying to pursue something and act like we've done something novel, and you tend to find out, oh man, somebody's been doing it. I always find that interesting. You read newspaper articles sometimes, and they'll say, well, this school system has got this, and somebody else will say, we've had that for 5 years. Like that was a new thing in this break. People do that all the time. They promote things as if it was this new concept and this new idea, and you'll bump into somebody that's been doing that for ages, right? And so he's just warning us, don't get pulled into that mindset of always trying to find out the newest and latest, because what has been, what will be, could have already been seen.
I always think about, our generation is worse when it comes to like Colin said, mistakes and sins and things like that, but really, back in Sodom and Gomorrah, everything they were doing is still the same thing that's going on now. It just never seems to change.
And the pursuit of the newest and latest, the manner in which it happens today may be different, right? The technologically advanced way that it might occur is different, but they found ways to engage. Remember when Paul was on Mars Hill, and he has that conversation there with those folks. He says, listen, that's all you people do is sit around talking about the newest philosophy and the newest piece of earthly wisdom that has come around. And so they've found ways, right? Whether it was in a marketplace, even in our country's history in the early days, you had these debate clubs, and they would form these sororities and fraternities in these colleges, and they'd set up shop contrary to each other, and they'd come out into the courtyard, and they'd debate the latest ideas and concepts. That process has been going on for ages. And yet man just keeps pursuing all this worldly human wisdom to his own demise and emptiness that it brings.
Well, it goes all the way back to the garden. Look what happened when they decided they wanted to be wiser than, because from the beginning.
Yeah, part of the temptation in the Garden of Eden was the fact Satan convinced God just doesn't want you to be as wise as he is, right? That's the idea. And why it's hindering you.
We're always wanting what the neighbor has.
Yeah, and we pursue sometimes, and we get so discontented that we spend all our time doing that. Yeah. You're good.
I told this quick little story to my general music class on Friday. It was a different context, but here's the story. There's a monastery full of monks, and there was a new initiate. And for hours and hours and hours, about 48 hours, maybe 2 days, they were debating how many teeth a horse has. And they went on for hours and hours and hours. And this new initiate said, well, there's a stable in the back. There's horses. Can we just count them? They kicked them out of the monastery. So what's my point? Is we want to seek the wisdom, but sometimes we don't want to have the clear.
Yeah, the answers are right there. But we'd rather debate it than just to find the clarity. Yeah, go ahead, Colin.
You hear a lot about this. It's almost like if you look at the new iPhone that comes out every year, and we see, oh, they blow up this thing, oh, about AI technology, oh, Google Translate stuff is coming out. It's the same thing. It's just they portray it differently. Maybe there might be one new thing, like the camera may be better, but it's the same functions. It'll get you the same what you need to do. Yeah. It's all just about blowing everything up.
Yeah, and I think in terms of that's the writer here's dealing more with mindsets, right, and not necessarily dissatisfied with things as he becomes dissatisfied with his understanding and the wisdom that he's gained. Because technology is always going to be that way, right? Slight improvements here and there over time. Go ahead, Jim.
It's nice to have things. When those things control your life, then you get a problem.
Then they're no longer useful because they create difficulty. Yep.
I think if you look at it from the standpoint of where is it going to get you? It's not going to take you anywhere else. And if you compare that to the pursuit of godly wisdom, you never stop learning. Yeah. You never stop growing.
Right. You avoid all the vanity if your pursuit is in the right direction and towards the wisdom that God provides us. I appreciate all those thoughts. Keep moving with me. Verse 10. Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? We've been talking about that. It hath been already of old time, which was before us. He gets deeper, though, in verse 11, where he says, there is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are to come with those that shall come after. Even when we try to do things to stop that problem, it still often occurs, right? We build monuments, we build memorials, we write historical narratives, we do all of these various things to try to say we won't forget about this. But we may not forget the moment. We may not forget that a historical event itself occurred. What do we forget, though? the lessons, right? We forget the lessons of it. That's what he's talking about here. We didn't learn anything. And there's people do great things, but they're eventually forgotten, right? And people move on. Go ahead, Jeff.
To me, the second half of that verse 11 is just another way of rewording history repeats its mistakes.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I think
Everything we do wrong, look a generation past, look 2 generations past, they're going to do it again. They're going to do it again. They're going to do it again. And that goes to the whole theme of the Bible, basically, that God says, look, you all are hard-headed.
Yeah.
I can bring up rocks that have the same sense that you have.
Yeah.
I can make them do what they're supposed to do easier than I can do it with you.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree. I think that is the idea here, right? That history keeps repeating because nobody really ever learns anything, and so we shouldn't be shocked today or in any generation when it happens, because here's Solomon of old, many generations before us, and he's already witnessed it, right? He's already seen how each generation comes and goes, and nobody really has learned anything. And again, that his point then is to show the futility of all that. We're going to become the smartest ever. Well, no, you're not, he said. All you're going to do is fill your minds with emptiness, because every generation has tried to be that generation. It just doesn't work that way, or man's abilities don't lend himself that way. And again, all of that is in contrast to the pursuit of godliness, and that's the challenge that these difficulties present. All right, so he switches gears a little bit in verse 12. And he says, I the preacher, and we talked a little bit about that phrase, preacher, on Wednesday night. I the preacher was king over Israel in Jerusalem. That was one of the hitching posts we looked at as it relates to this being most likely Solomon, because if he was king over Israel in Jerusalem, right, they only had 3 kings that ruled the whole nation undivided in Jerusalem, and that was Saul, David, and Solomon. And so it was one of the things that we could evidence that this is likely Solomon that's writing these things. But he gives that thought anyway. Verse 13, and I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done. Now notice this, all things that are done where? Under heaven, right? Under heaven. In other words, I pursued every ounce of human thought and wisdom and philosophy and ideas that there were. I pursued it all. I gave my heart out to seeking those things. And here's his response. This sore travail hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised therewith. Man has spent a lot of time and energy trying to figure out everything under the sun without any thought to that, or under heaven, without any thought to what was in heaven, right? That's the contrast. I sought out everything I could think about when it came to the things of this earth and all this philosophical wisdom of man under heaven. And it's just this sore travail, because all the real wisdom resides in heaven with the God of heaven. I have seen all the works, verse 14, that are done under the sun, and behold, it all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Every effort made that doesn't have God in the center of it is vanity and vexation. That's the point that he's making. If it is humanly centered, if it's under heaven centered, it's vexation of spirit. It wears you out, right? It just wears your soul out. And it's all empty in the process when the concentrations are things under heaven.
Something I just thought of too is pointing out that he was the king. This is a man who had access to absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Everything. This wasn't a man that had limited access. So I think that's important to note, that everything. This isn't, just a tiny little bit of experience that he's going through.
Right. And it's, when you think about, anyway, all that energy and effort, right? It's made. Go ahead, Bob.
I know the wisdom that God has is godly wisdom. But can you explain to me the difference of the wisdom that we have, whether it's earthly wisdom or spiritual wisdom?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess you would have to define it by what its purpose was and what right? If it is it something relating to how we function and live on the earth, then it's earthly. If it has something to do with how we build a spiritual
Knowledge from wisdom would have to be on the earth.
Well, I mean, you had to learn it here, but it's not earthly, right? The wisdom of God isn't earthly. The wisdom of God is yeah. Right, but if I'm understanding the question, but that's what he provides his wisdom in the book, right, in the Bible, and if we learn that wisdom, that's not, even though we learned it here, that's not earthly wisdom. That's
the understanding of the Bible is the godly wisdom that we would have.
That's correct. If I'm
That he brings about the wisdom and knowledge.
Yeah.
Is he understanding what God has done for creation, or?
Well, I think he does have that understanding. I think you see that in his writings. Let me simplify, if I can, what I believe he's pushing at here. He's simply trying to make sure we realize that if we spend a lot of travail and a lot of time and a lot of energy pursuing things of this earth, human wisdom, and learning the next greatest thing, and spending our time pursuing the knowledge that man has devised on his own rather than listening to God, we're wasting our time. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. And we'll get to it, right? Eventually he'll say it in later chapters. He'll say it where your mind really ought to be is focusing on. I think he says it in 1,000 different ways in the book, but he's always trying to say is, man thinks he's getting really wise on his own, based on his own wisdom, and he's not. God's wisdom is the only one that has long-term benefit and value. And then he just uses a billion illustrations inside the book to show that. That's, to me, I mean, that's my simplistic view of the book, that he's just laying those two things beside each other. The wisdom of God that he shares with us through the Bible, and the wisdom of man that comes and goes. One generation forgets what the last one learned, and it just ends up empty all the time. That's my simplistic view of what he's saying.
If everything is good from God, then the wisdom of man is against God, is evil. Everything that is good comes from God. So the wisdom of the things that we learn that are good all comes from God.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. And because the Bible even talks about, I can't forget who the writer is right now, but it talks about the wisdom of man versus the wisdom of God. The writer talks about that there's no comparison.
Right.
I don't know if that's Paul or who it is. I can't remember, but.
And we'll see some of that in this book before we're done. Good, Rod.
To me, I have to look at, is wisdom in itself inherently good or inherently evil? It's the use of wisdom that is either good or evil. Therefore, I would think we're either using the wisdom of God that he has provided, or we're perverting the wisdom of God for the things here on earth.
Yeah, and that certainly can happen. And pretty evident that it has, right? That man has taken what God has given him and abused it. So.
The things you really focus on, I think you brought it up, was we can't do this ourselves. A lot of people think, oh, we can do this ourselves. You know, we're humans, we're mighty. But we're just, and there's this example that's brought up in the Bible, I don't remember exactly where. We're just a speck of dust in God's eyes. We're less than that. We cannot do this without Him.
And again, you'll see that. Let me add, because I think verse 15, that which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. Again, I think there's the contrast, right? Man thinks he can eventually get smart enough on his own that what God has said is crooked, I'll figure out a way to straighten it out. Or what God said can't really be enumerated, I'll figure out a way to count it. And I think, again, that's my simplistic thought process as it relates to the book. That's the contrast that he's making. Man just pursues wisdom and pursues wisdom to ultimately, and by the way, we've kind of been there for a long time. The reason for that, let me at least throw this at you in this study. The reason why man does that is because he wants to remove God from the equation, right? Man wants to remove God from the conversation. And if man can convince himself that he's gotten so wise and so smart that I can even take that which is crooked and make it straight. I can take that which can't be numbered. No, I'm going to count it. And that's the problem, is that kind of pursuit, that earthly wisdom pursuit leads men to decide, I'm smart enough now that I don't even need God. Why do I need His wisdom? Why do I need, I've already figured everything out on my own. And I think that's one of those kind of umbrella thoughts that keeps coming up throughout the book. And that's the danger, is that we become so earthly wise that we don't even think we need God's wisdom because I'm smart enough as I am.
Part of that perversion, I think, comes from man likes to believe that their wisdom is greater, but that is a twisted logic that's given to us by the prince of the power of the air, who also wants to twist God's wisdom and make everything about entertainment and about everything that he can pervert and twist to keep our eyes off of the real prize.
And again, I think you're right. I think, and we'll see that, right? That's the problem. As long as your eyes are over here and God's over here, then you're in trouble, and you'll just deepen and further that.
I just had a question, and I don't know the verse now. Maybe you can help me out. When Solomon asked for the wisdom from God, did he ask for godly wisdom? I can't remember. Here's why. Because it kind of ties back to what everyone's been saying. Verse 13, and I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom. I gave it. It was the free will. It was the free agency. And then I'm looking, at what the intent is. And I'm looking back at Exodus. And I didn't realize Exodus is such a filled chapter about wisdom. And this is Exodus, to give you an example, Exodus 31:3, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God and wisdom, and in understanding, and in knowledge, and the manner of all workmanship, and it's toward God. So that's what my question was.
Well, and so it's interesting, right? Because God comes to him and says, "You've been made king. What do you want?" And blank check. And Solomon says, these are your people, and I need to lead them in the right way. I need wisdom. And what we learn from also is that God said, yes, right? Okay. So that wisdom came from God, because that was the request. That's what God granted him. And then some, right? Here's what I see. If I'm right, and this is an older Solomon, right? So God gave him wisdom to lead the people. Then he decided on his own to pursue wisdom beyond what God had given him. And that's where the vanity of vanities came in. God had already blessed him with exactly what he needed, but he chose to spend a lot of the rest of his life pursuing the wisdom of men, even though he had already been granted the greatest piece of wisdom that anybody could ever been given, that came direct from God himself. That's what I see. But so because God gave it to him, I'd have to say that wisdom was exactly what God wanted him to have. it was his pursuits after that tend to cause a problem. Does that make sense?
The old devil, he uses things to try to draw you away from God.
Yeah.
And sometimes that'll work.
Yeah, and we have to admit where that source is, right? Who's really trying to get me away from God? And the father of lies, right? Bob, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Going back, looking at it from a reverse standpoint. In the beginning, God created everything on this planet. So, in verse 9, when he's saying there is nothing new under the sun, that means everything was created, we still are discovering it. But it's not new.
Yeah.
So, the wisdom that we're gaining is, whether you define it as wisdom or knowledge, it's something that's always been there.
Yeah. And I appreciate that, because I think you're right. I think man discovers something or thinks he has or whatever, but he believes he's found something new, but it's always been. Yeah, and I do think the writer here deals with that idea that man's always free. Oh, man, I found this new thing, and it didn't really. Go ahead, Steve.
I want to read those couple of verses I was talking about.
You're fine, go ahead.
I found them. 1 Corinthians 3:18 and 19. Let no one deceive himself. If anyone among you seems to be wise in this age, let him become a fool, that he may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. For it is written, he catches the wise in their own craftiness. So I think Paul's telling the Corinthians there, to avoid earthly wisdom.
Yeah.
Because there's no benefit in it.
Yeah.
The benefit in this life is from the knowledge of God.
Yeah, well, the book is filled, right, with just concerns and warnings and helps and aids to kind of get us in the right direction.
I think this is an interesting way we talk about how the Bible works together all the way through. I think this kind of sheds a new light on the way when you see Jesus talking to his disciples saying, I haven't told you everything yet, and there is still stuff that I have not told you, and I'm not going to tell you yet. Yeah. Because God, he told them what they need to know right then and there, and he wants us to look for his wisdom, but not look for other wisdom. So I think it's kind of the new light on God tells us what we need to know, and hopefully we'll take that and want to look for more of what he has to tell us.
Yeah. And the only real pursuit should be the wisdom that God provides. And sometimes we become dissatisfied with what he provides and we start trying to fill in the blanks. And that can create challenges.
Look at the world today and just use what we can see around us as, there are so many things in the world that are just a mess today.
Yeah.
Because we didn't follow God's wisdom. Man thought he was so much smarter, and he has put forth rules and regulations that God wouldn't have approved of.
Yeah.
And it just gets out of hand.
The wisdom of man generally doesn't create good things, right? It's the wisdom of God that provides that which is good. And I think we hinted at that earlier in a conversation. And we just don't learn it. Not enough, anyway. Not enough men learn that, unfortunately. He said,
he writes there about wisdom in verse 11. Wisdom is good with an inheritance, and by it there is profit to them that see the sun. For wisdom is a defense, and money is a defense, but the excellency of knowledge is that wisdom giveth life to them that have it. Consider the work of God, for who can make that straight which he hath made crooked?
Yeah. So again, it's a reminder, and he'll talk more and more about what he means by all these things when we move through the book. He said, I communed with mine own heart, verse 16, saying, Lo, I am come to great estate, and have gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. That seems to fit Solomon as well. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I gave my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is vexation of spirit. I pursued it in every way humanly possible, he says, basically. Every ounce of wisdom that was out there, every piece of knowledge that was out there, I tried to seek and find all of it. And yet, yeah, all about him, and it wrecked him. He said it just became vexation of spirit, and wore him down. Here's interesting, for in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. Why? Why is that true? Okay, now all of a sudden I become more accountable to more things. That's part of that.
Kind of like Paul saying that he didn't know he was sinning until he had the new law.
Okay, and that's a similar kind of thing. I don't think he's talking about God's wisdom here, though, right? He's talking about the wisdom of man. God's wisdom wouldn't bring grief. Right. The more you dive into all of that, it's vexation of spirit. It wears you out. And the writer said, I thought I was going to benefit from learning everything that I could about everything, and all it did was wreck him. And I think sometimes we're guilty of the same thing. We got to know. I got to know. I got to know. I got to know. And there's a lot of days I simply don't need to know. Right? I don't need to know. And have you ever learned something and wish you hadn't? Yeah, right? We've all been in a situation where when we learned it, we wish we hadn't, because maybe it just was something that was unnecessary, something that wasn't helpful, something that was discouraging, something that didn't bring edification, right? There's a million reasons why. But if we're always feel like we have to know, it can create difficulties for us. I appreciate.
You have to appreciate Saul because he's not bragging. He's simply telling us if you try to go after everything, at the end of the day, it's not going to do you good.
Speaking of the increase of knowledge brings forth sorrow, independently of God. But the objects of knowledge boiled down are what is natural and what is immoral. That's it.
Somewhere the sun is